Streaming, recording. Wait for the stream. Looks okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back. Welcome also to the many students watching this online. For those who are watching live, I apologize. We're running a little late today. Our earlier class ran over, but we have a lot of good questions, and as always, more questions than we'll get to. I apologize in advance if we don't get to your question, and we'll continue to alternate between questions from our local students and those online. We'll start online. Let me just check this. Looks okay. It looks okay. All right. First question from Jay in New York, who asks, is reading spiritual books as a spiritual practice beneficial if the books are from other religious traditions or more generic in nature, or will this cause confusion on one's spiritual journey? The answer is depends. This is an individual person asking for himself, and it really depends on where you are in your spiritual path. If you are not yet, if you have not yet come to consider Advaita Vedanta as the right path for you. So I'm speaking in negatives, so it's not very helpful. Suppose you have decided by now that Advaita Vedanta is the right path for you. Chances are, before that decision, you might have read lots and lots of books, which is really good. But once you have come to that discernment that for you, Advaita Vedanta is the best path, at that point, I would suggest you stop reading other materials and focus more on Advaita Vedanta, because there's so much and it takes so much. There's so much depth if you kind of spread yourself very thin, so to speak, spending a lot of time on other reading, and you don't spend much time with Advaita Vedanta. It may not be very helpful. So if you have discovered that Advaita Vedanta is the best path for you, best teaching for you, then set aside other teachings. On the other hand, at some point, after at least many years of Advaita Vedanta, when you really get it, notice this qualification, when you really get it, then you might find it helpful to go outside of Advaita Vedanta and see how other teachings compare, because we learn through comparison and contrast. But notice that's when you really get it. If you do that before you really get it, it's likely to cause confusion. I hope that answers the question. Next question from Ram, who lives in Bangalore. He asks, how does the non-dual Vedantic path compare to the yogic path? And by yogic path, I presume we're talking about Patanjali and his path of yoga. How does it compare in attaining the state of nirvana or jnana nishta? So in the non-dual Vedantic path, we say the goal is moksha, and we further define moksha in this twofold way. Moksha is not just freedom from rebirth. Moksha is freedom from suffering here and now. Moksha. In Patanjali's system of yoga, moksha, they use the term kaivalya instead of moksha. Kaivalya means isolation. It means that you are isolated from any kind of suffering. So at one level, they seem to mean the same thing. Moksha, no suffering. Kaivalya, no suffering. How they get there is quite different. In Advaita Vedanta, the goal, as Ram said, is this jnana nishtha, when you are firmly established in the discovery of your true nature as unchanging consciousness. Can unchanging consciousness suffer? No. Mind goes on changing, consciousness is unaffected. So that is the Vedantic solution. The yogic solution in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is really surprisingly different. Even though there's a lot of jnanam, spiritual wisdom, in that tradition, the goal is really more of a psychological one. After all the meditation and samadhi is all for the sake of the mind, and there are certain practices which are meant to remove any kind of samskara which can distract you from samadhi. So when your mind is fully established in samadhi and not affected by any past samskaras, that is how yoga achieves the state of kaivalya. So the main difference then is Advaita Vedanta achieves it through discovery of your true self, and yoga achieves it through a set of practices meant to make the mind unaffected by anything. So when the mind is unaffected, then you are unaffected. So when you put it in those terms, they're quite different. On the other hand, in Advaita Vedanta, we love to borrow heavily from the teachings of Patanjali because as a teacher of meditation, there's none better. So we will incorporate the teachings on the practice of meditation, but the way Patanjali envisions the goal, that part would not be accepted by traditional teachers of Advaita Vedanta. There's a follow-up question. What advice would you give? What advice would you like to give me? What advice would you give me? I'm on the path of, I have to paraphrase this a little bit. So Ram is on the path of knowledge, Advaita Vedanta, but he says, my ko-satsangi has taken a yogic path. A spiritual friend has taken the path of yoga. So how should I advise Ram to, what should he tell his friend who's on the path of yoga, which for an Advaita Vedantin is not the ultimately helpful path? What advice should Ram give his spiritual friend who is on the path of yoga? And the answer is no advice. No advice. Why give him advice? If he's on a path that's working for him, good. Go, in nice American English, go for it. No problem. Even Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says, Buddhi bhedam na janayet. If somebody is on a spiritual path, who are we to determine what's best for them? Leave him. On the other hand, if the friend starts asking a lot of questions about Advaita Vedanta, then you can respond to that. But the idea how different. Our Christian friends look at Hinduism in general and Advaita Vedanta and make a judgment, inferior, and therefore they try to convert us. But here, and especially following Sri Krishna's advice, when you see someone on another spiritual path, first of all, who are you to consider that it's inferior, much less try to convert them to your path? This is a problem. And thank goodness we don't see that problem in the Hindu tradition. All right, next question from Ajay, who lives in Melbourne. Could you please elaborate on the different levels of samadhi in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras? I've made a casual reference to 7 different kinds of samadhi described by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. Obviously, it would take quite a while to go through all the details, especially since you really need a lot of preliminaries to understand how Patanjali himself understands samadhi. So it's not an appropriate topic for satsanga. On the other hand, my lectures on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are available on our website. So if you want to understand Yoga Sutras in more detail, you can you can go to those lectures. Next, from Braden. Braden lives in Taiwan. Is there a thought or prayer that one can repeat during the day to strengthen the journey along the Dharma path? Does Advaita Vedanta prescribe a mantra? A mantra you should recite all day long? No, there's no mantra. But I think what Braden is hinting at here, a thought or prayer that's with you throughout the day, Braden is describing karma yoga. That's exactly what karma yoga is all about. It is a thought or prayer you have with you all day long to strengthen your spiritual growth. As we've discussed, when we discuss karma yoga, you may have heard me define karma yoga as a set of teachings and practices that are meant to convert ordinary worldly activities into spiritual practice. That is a very accurate definition of what karma yoga is. What are those what are the concepts and practices is a huge, huge topic. So that we won't get into right here, except to say that, thought or prayer, that's what karma yoga is. It's thoughts and prayers that can convert your ordinary daily activities into spiritual practice, sadhana, and to learn more about it. I think, again, another huge topic. There was a really nice video I published on called The Secret of Karma Yoga. It's a very, very short but very surprisingly complete description of and teaching of what karma yoga is. Okay, let's take one more here. This is from Dimitra, who lives in Greece. Nice. I am currently studying Viveka Chudamani, listening to your lectures. Could you please comment on the akhandakara vritti? Wow. So akhandakara vritti is a technical term that we use for the knowledge that removes the so-called veil of ignorance covering your true nature. Or simply put, jnana vritti, the vritti of knowledge. And here, instead of calling it jnana vritti, a vritti of knowledge, it's called akhandakara, a vritti whose akara, whose form is akhanda, partless, meaning limitless, vast, infinite. So it's a technical term, needs to be understood properly. Here's how it works. This is a Vedantic perspective on knowledge. The Vedantic perspective on knowledge is this. Knowledge destroys ignorance and reveals what is there. So ignorance is represented by darkness. If you are in a dark room, you can't see anything. You turn on a light. That light removes the darkness in the room and reveals whatever is there. So with that in mind, think if there is, that darkness represents ignorance, so ignorance has to be removed, but ignorance has to be removed by a proper knowledge. I know that sounds really abstract, so let me make that clear. Suppose you are ignorant about a computer language called C++, or I think C++ nowadays. It was C when in the 1970s. So it's been revised twice. I used to program in C. Anyway, C became C++, became C++. Computer programming language. If you want to learn about C++, should you read a book on ancient Roman history? Pretty obvious, right? So you need an appropriate means to remove a particular kind of ignorance or to reveal a certain kind of subject matter. In this case, the subject matter is your true nature, Satchidananda Atma, already present reality, which you fail to recognize fully because of that so-called veil of ignorance. So in order to learn C++, you need knowledge in the form of C++. You get the idea? So you need not just any kind of knowledge, you need knowledge in the form of C++. If you want to remove that veil of ignorance covering your true nature, you need knowledge. Knowledge of C++ isn't going to help at all. You need knowledge that represents your true nature, right? Instead of knowledge in the form of C++, you need knowledge in the form of Satchidananda Atma. Listen to that again. Instead of knowledge in the form of C++, knowledge in the form of Satchidananda Atma. What is the form of Satchidananda Atma? No form. Akhanda. Akhandakara. So the vritti, whose form has no limits, has no physicality attached. Limit is physicality. So a vritti, a thought, a knowledge thought, which is suitable for removing ignorance about your true nature as Satchidananda Atma and making you discover your true nature. That is technically called akhandakara vritti, because the nature of Atma is akhanda, partless. Okay, do we have questions here in the room? Okay, we'll start here. I think, yeah, the camera wasn't working right last time. Now.
Swamiji?
Yes, we hear you.
Swamiji, consciousness is illuminator, sakshi, asanga. Those things, it's clear to me. But knower is not clear at all. So please explain.
Sakshi is clear to you, but knower.
Knower.
Okay, that's not. So we use these words to describe consciousness in certain situations. If we want to describe consciousness, your true nature, Atma, if we want to talk about it with regard to the mind in general, we say that consciousness reveals or illumines. You used the word illumine nicely. Consciousness reveals or illumines whatever is happening in your mind right now, and we call that sakshi, awareful witness. That much is understood. When we say from another perspective that consciousness is the knower. In Sanskrit, jnata. Jnata means knower. That means consciousness, when you say, I know that Swami Tadatmananda is sitting in the chair, you know. There is a process of knowing going on. You say, I know. When you say I know, on the surface that I is ahankara, but all of this takes place in consciousness. When you know, let me use some simpler language. Can you know anything in the absence of consciousness? Doesn't make sense, right? So knowing takes place due to consciousness. Consciousness that enables you to know is called knower. Consciousness that enables you to know anything. That consciousness is called knower.
But it needs help of ahankara.
Knower is ahankara. You didn't ask about ahankara, so...
Knowing means you need sense organs and other organs to know.
No. How do you know what's in your mind right now? You don't need sense organs. So you can be a knower without sense organs.
So to know, you need the help of ahankara, isn't it? Otherwise...
You can't say you need the help of. It's there. It's just there. And it's taking place due to consciousness. In order to have any experience, thank you, to have any experience at all, you need consciousness and you need something known. In order, you need observer and observed. Observer implies ahankara. Knower implies ahankara. You can't be an observer unless you say, I see. You can't be a knower unless you say, I know. In both cases, that I, when you say, I see, that's ahankara. When you say, I know, that's ahankara. Why is it not atma? Can atma say, I see? Atma doesn't say anything. Atma doesn't do... Can Atma know anything? Atma doesn't do anything. Atma doesn't say anything. Atma doesn't do anything. Because of the presence of consciousness, your mind works. And when your mind works, you have the experience, I am aware of what's happening in my mind. Sakshi. And of course, ahankara is present. And then when you say, I know this and that and the other thing, and you don't, whether or not it's through sense perception or not, when you say, I know, again, ahankara, but it's all the function of consciousness in different contexts.
So is it a swarupa then? Like
No. Is it swarupa? Swarupa is just consciousness without anything known. When we talk about atma swarupa, being consciousness, the moment you talk about swarupa, you can't talk about something else. Either you're talking about knower or known. When you're talking about something that's known, you're not talking about the knower. When you use the word swarupa, you're talking only about the knower. Right? Okay. Another question here?
Swamiji, following up on Dimitri's question on the sound?
Yeah, coming.
Okay. Following up on Dimitri's question, in fact, I'm at the same spot on Viveka Chudamani. So I was thinking of akhandakara vritti and trying to compare it with what we had studied earlier with atma sakshatkara as a prerequisite for nididhyasana. And my understanding, please correct me, Swamiji, is that atma sakshatkara can be with, I think, obstacles. And akhandakara vritti is the removal of ignorance. Is my understanding correct? Or is there...
What did you just say?
Atma sakshatkara as a prerequisite for nididhyasana, as we have studied. I think in Upadesha Sastri we had
Go ahead.
covered a part saying that it is, it can be with obstacles.
Yeah,
right?
but what you said after that?
And that is where it differs from akhandakara vritti.
Akhandakara vritti is the same as atma sakshatkara. There's no difference. This is the discovery of your true self. Thank you. The discovery of your true nature, which we vaguely call enlightenment. Again, whether you call it atma, sakshatkara, the immediate discovery of your true nature, or if you call it the presence of the akhandakara vritti, a vritti that comes along, destroys ignorance, reveals your true nature. It's the same. And in both cases, if you are some kind of spiritual genius, once you have that one thought, you're done. Capital I, capital F. If you are some kind of spiritual genius, you're done. All you need is that one discovery, one recognition, one vritti, one jnana vritti, one akhandakara vritti. That's all you need. But if you're an ordinary human being, like me, it's not enough. You're not done. Because we have the technical term you're referring to is pratibandhaka jnanam, knowledge which is present with certain mental obstacles. And for normal human beings, plenty of obstacles remain after the initial discovery of your true nature. So we wouldn't really differentiate between the two. So it's both an initial discovery an initial discovery that is usually accompanied by obstacles. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, any other question? One more question in back here. Yes, please.
Hey, good morning, Swami T. I have a practical question regarding the purpose of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just provide some context. I guess as individuals, we made up with the physical body and also emotional body, energy body, perhaps mind maybe somewhere fits in between. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that if the cosmos consciousness is always there,
Mm-hmm.
yet what's preventing us from making a connection? So basically either taking instruction from it or basically to have alignment with the cosmos consciousness.
Okay.
And for that goal, how does...
Can I just ask to take instruction from or come into alignment with the cosmos?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
To have a manifestation of, I guess, depend on who you talk to, right? Some people say there is an individual consciousness. Others say there's no such thing as individual consciousness because it's all part of a cosmos
Right.
consciousness. And to that end, I guess the question becomes, how can we achieve having the manifestation of the cosmos consciousness in our daily lives?
Okay. I'll have some difficulty in answering your question because I'm a teacher of Advaita Vedanta, and in Advaita Vedanta we have a very detailed structure. Everything is explained with really, really precise terminology. You're using a lot of terminology that doesn't translate into Sanskrit for me. For me, this is a tradition when I'm trained. So when you talk about a cosmos having a manifestation in our daily lives, that kind of language is, I have a hard time understanding exactly what it means. So before I even attempt to answer your question, would you like to rephrase that in any way? What does it mean for the cosmos to manifest in your daily life?
Let me try this, right? I guess the other day, last Wednesday, I came for the advanced meditation in which I was under the impression that we want to have a direction to the true self, right? So to that end, I suppose I don't necessarily understand the difference between true self for now. I suppose, how do we build a connection to true self?
Okay, that's a very different question. Because, yeah, thank you. By the way, is the button, I think the microphone is not working. Did somebody push the button on the bottom maybe? Yeah, give it to me, please. Yeah.
It's on.
It is on.
Red light was on.
Yeah, so when the button is pushed once, it mutes.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to cover the button from now on. Okay, because our online viewers probably couldn't hear. They hear a little bit through my mic, but they won't hear your question. Okay, so the first question was, how does the cosmos becomes manifest in our daily life? And then the second, which I said I don't understand the question. And the second question was, how do we discover our inner self? Is that a fair statement? And the second question I can definitely address, because this is what Advaita Vedanta is all about. And that is, according to these teachings, your essence, the essence of who you are as a conscious being, that essence is separate from your body and mind, and what you said before indicates that you understand that quite clearly. There is an essence, an essential nature, which is independent of your body and mind. In the Hindu tradition, it's loosely called the inner divinity. In other traditions, they use different languages, different words to describe that. And according to Advaita Vedanta, that is, that inner divinity, which is utterly unaffected by all the problems of life. Take it right now as a hypothesis. According to the teachings of Vedanta, the essence of who you are is utterly unaffected by all kinds of worldly suffering. Right now you take that as a hypothesis. Suppose these teachings can lead you to confirm that hypothesis through a process of self-inquiry, through a process of looking within, using these teachings to understand, who am I really? What is the nature of my essence? So that inward turned process of inquiry then leads to the discovery, let me stay with my language, leads to the confirmation of that hypothesis that your essence is unaffected by all worldly problems, therefore you are okay no matter what, free from suffering. This is the culmination of that process of discovering the inner self. The inner self is, as I said, take it as a hypothesis right now, and the inner self is an essential self which is utterly unaffected by problems. So that hypothesis can be confirmed experientially through these teachings. You know what I'd like to suggest, your question suggests that you don't have too much exposure to these teachings, and the advanced meditation program you came to was an advanced meditation. So I think it would help you if you had a little more background. And on my YouTube channel, there's a set of videos called Introduction to Vedanta, a set of 6 short videos. Start there. And I think that would help us communicate more clearly. So we would have a common language, and you would understand you asked about the purpose of meditation, was actually where you started your discussion. So that would become clear, much more clear, if you give that a shot.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Nice to have you here. Okay, let's take some more questions online. Next from Timo. Timo doesn't say where. From Germany. It says right here. It says, this is Timo from Germany. And what do? I look at the header, Timo and his last name. I look at the closing, regards Timo, and I don't look. This is Timo from Germany. Good. Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but Timo says, I'm currently reading the Upanishads. In the translator's introduction, it is stated that samadhi is the experience of pure consciousness. But you said that samadhi is a state of mind. That would be a contradiction in itself if a state of mind were equated with the experience of pure consciousness. There is a contradiction. In the translator's introduction, it stated that samadhi is the experience of pure consciousness. Welcome to the world of translations. So, we can all figure out that most people who translate Upanishads are not enlightened, right? They're authors. An author is someone who translates and publishes Upanishads. Generally enlightened, there's no guarantee that anyone who has made the effort to translate the Upanishads and get them commercially published, which means making money, there's no guarantee that that person understands everything correctly, and certainly no guarantee that that person is enlightened. So when we're reading English books or German books or anything else, be prepared. And you should expect to find errors. How could it be otherwise? If you want to find something without error, you have to read the Sanskrit Upanishads with a Sanskrit commentary by Shankaracharya. Then you won't find any errors. Most people don't have the freedom to dedicate years to learn Sanskrit properly, so you're stuck with translations, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, we can find the best translations possible. And for Upanishads, I think Swami Gambhirananda, Nikhilananda, these would be the best translations available, but they're still not perfect. And I have no idea what's written in the introductions to those books. If you want good translations of these Sanskrit works, Swami Gambhirananda and Swami Nikhilananda, both of them are associated with the Ramakrishna Mission. I think it's called Advaita Ashrama as a publisher. Those would be the best translations available. But then we're talking about his introduction, and that could be something else. So, here, and let me show you why errors creep in. If the translator defines samadhi as the experience of pure consciousness, a proper understanding of Advaita Vedanta would lead us to understand it's not possible to have the experience of pure consciousness. And here's why. So, there is an experiencer and an experienced. In samadhi, there is the meditator and the object of meditation. But we'll stay with experience, the experiencer and the experienced. The experiencer is you, right? The experienced is not you, something else. So the experiencer is you, not only in an individual sense, but in an absolute sense. The experiencer ultimately is Satchidananda Atma. That has to be discovered. The experiencer, the essential nature, to go with our language from before, the essential nature of the experiencer, the essence, the truth of the experiencer is Atma. And Atma is pure consciousness. If Atma is pure consciousness, and that Atma is the experiencer who is pure consciousness, how can that experiencer experience pure consciousness? But that's what the translator said. If samadhi is the experience of pure consciousness, in Advaita Vedanta, properly understood, it is not possible to have the experience of Atma, because Atma is the experiencer. It's not possible to have the experience of pure consciousness, because pure consciousness happens to be Atma, the experiencer. So, the word of warning, what is that? The Latin expression, caveat emptor. Beware. Buyer beware. There are problems in every book. And even the Sanskrit texts, I said, they have to be properly understood. So, I know we need books, we need translations. Just be careful and understand that you will find errors. Not might. You will find errors. Okay. Next this is from Tejaswini, who lives in Mumbai. She asks about swadharma, one's duty. How do we define swadharma while in a family? And complicated. In family matter, many times we know that someone, it says something is on the wrong track, but something means someone. So in your family, you see that a family member is on the wrong track. And pardon me, Tejaswini, for kind of playing with your words, but I wanted to be more clear. Suppose we know that someone in the family is on the wrong track, and we want to address that problem. But we also want to avoid conflicts. And we also don't want to get an insulting response. Sounds like a normal family, doesn't it? That's the way families are. We have that expression, walking on eggshells. You don't want to say the wrong thing because the other person will get angry or insulted and blast you in response. So please guide where to draw a line and how to decide when you should, and again I have to paraphrase, when you should address the problem or when you should not address the problem. She says to avoid conflicts and to avoid an insulting response. In American English, we say, bite your tongue. All right. How do you know when you should address a problem and when you should bite your tongue in dealing with family complexities? That's a really good question because it describes a reality that everyone in a family faces all the time. And not just in a family, even in a workplace or with friends. There's so many situations where, should I say, should I not say? Should I just let it slide? Another American expression, or when to address and when to let it slide. And you can appreciate that there's no general rule because every situation will be so different and entirely different. So we can't generalize it and say, as a rule, you should always address a problem because otherwise you're being irresponsible, or as a rule, you should never address a problem because you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to create conflict. These are two extremes. And you can't say you should always do one or you should never do one. I mean, it depends on the situation. So then what would be some good guidance to help you decide when should you address a problem and when should you not? And the answer, the short answer is to consider the consequences, but in a more formal way. To consider the consequences means to imagine, and this is, I'm going to be a little bit detailed here, to imagine as precisely as possible what would be the outcome if you addressed the problem and what would be the outcome if you didn't address the problem. And it takes some thought. Most of the times we make decisions like that in a second, right? You know, should I address this or should I let it slide? You make that decision there and then on the fly, right? It's a complicated situation. Can you make a good decision in a second? Suppose the president of a country makes a decision in a second. Will that be a well-considered decision or not? You know, important things require deep thought. And if it's something of significance in your family, you should think it through. And first thing is, you don't have to make a decision here and now. Should I address this or should I let it slide? You don't need to address it in the moment. When the person has some behavior or said something wrong, on the wrong track, should I address it now or should I let it slide forever? And the answer is neither. Think about it. And as I said, to imagine, to create a scenario in your mind as specific and detailed and accurate as you can possibly do, and imagine, if I address it, what will happen? And what will be the consequences? And if she does this, what should I do? If he does that, then what should I do? You have to go, like a chess game. Complicated, right? There are moves and moves, and you have to think several moves ahead. You can do that. You're all, in dealing with family members, you're skilled. You are all skillful in handling things at home, so you have to go through the steps. So if you address it, what will happen, what can happen, what can you do, how can you respond? And if you don't address it, what will be the consequences? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? And the truth of the matter is you don't know which. Your scenarios that you imagine will never be perfectly accurate. But it's the best you can do. Certainly it's better than making a decision in 1 second. It won't be perfect, but better than a 1 second decision. So based on some reflection, you choose to address it or choose to let it slide. And I'll end this with one of the most brilliant bits of advice my guru ever gave. He said, make a decision today, after reflection, make a decision today, but be ready to change it tomorrow. If you discover that it was the wrong decision, that can happen. Okay, nice. Okay, we have time maybe for 1 or 2 more. We'll keep this to about an hour. Next question from Amar, who lives in Uttar Pradesh. Amar asks, he puts a statement in quotation, the universe exists only when there is someone to observe it. I'll say that again. The universe exists only when there is someone to observe it. Please help me understand it better. This is another instance of finding a little tidbit in a book, which may not be true. This, you can definitely find books that say the universe exists only when there is someone to observe it. That statement does not accurately express the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. So please help me understand it better. I can't help you understand it better. It's not, as I said before, I teach Advaita Vedanta. This is not Advaita Vedanta. There are certain schools called idealistic schools, idealism. And idealism is a philosophical doctrine that would agree with this. The universe exists only when there is someone to observe it. So a philosophy called idealism would agree with this statement. Advaita Vedanta would not. Next question from Stefano. Stefano says, actually this is with reference to a question last week he asked. And he's apologizing because the question was confusing. He asked about, last week he asked about Mahasamadhi. Generally we use that word Mahasamadhi to refer to a saint who has died. We say they take Mahasamadhi. But in his question, Stefano then made reference to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and to different kinds of samadhi. And that led me to misunderstand his question. When you say Mahasamadhi and then talk about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, where he defines 7 kinds of samadhi, and then then in his question he ends up by talking about samadhi, which is an experience. I didn't get the sense that he was talking about death from his question, so he apologizes that he was talking about death. So, Mahasamadhi is it is, I forget, there's a name for that kind of term. When you want to use a soft word, maybe someone can tell me what is it? Euphemism. Euphemism. You don't want to say someone died. Doesn't sound nice. So sometimes we say, oh, he passed away, he passed on, which is nice. I mean, why should we use an in-your-face kind of word? He died when he fell over dead. How's that? Just not very pleasing language. So then we like more pleasing language. So then we say that someone passed away. That's a very common, and it's a nice expression. But then when a great saint or enlightened person dies, then we use another euphemism, a more respectful euphemism. And the euphemism is he or she attained Mahasamadhi. It's a euphemism. So Mahasamadhi is not samadhi, which was a confusion from last week. Mahasamadhi means dead. But it's this euphemism we use for when a great person dies. So with that in mind, Stefano goes on to ask, it's said that some people who get enlightened have the power to deliberately choose the time when they leave their body and die. He gives some examples. I've read that could even happen for some Buddhist monks. Can you give us a rational or Vedantic perspective on this phenomenon? Well, no doubt it's true that some enlightened people have chosen the time of their death. Absolutely true. It's equally true that some non-enlightened people have chosen the time of their death. It's also true. It happens. It happens sometimes because, in fact, you may even know of a situation where a person is resisting death. They're holding on. Then they decide to let go, or you convince them to let go. So when that person decides to let go, occasionally it happens that they pass away in minutes after letting go. They're not enlightened, This seems to be a function of the mind, that will to live, that instinct, very strong instinct to live. So I don't think the ability to die at a chosen moment, I don't think that's restricted to enlightened people. And I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I made a comment that you don't have to agree with me. I have an opinion here. When I say it's an opinion, it means I don't expect you to accept everything I say. This is an opinion. In my opinion, and in my observation over the years, enlightened people do not have special powers. This is my observation over 50 years of spiritual life, and this is also my strong conviction based on the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. Enlightened people are... My guru's own words. Oh, you'll like this too. I love this. My guru said once, an enlightened person is a normal person. This is an exact quote. An enlightened person is a normal person. Then he added on a few words. An enlightened person is a normal person. The only normal person. Means a person without all this nonsense in our minds. Okay, one more. Then, let's see here. Oh, okay. We'll end with this one. This is from Juan, who lives in Stuttgart, Germany. That's 2 from Germany today. How about that? What does it mean to live a finite and fragile life in an infinite and eternal universe? Wow. I'm not sure, but it might be that Juan watched... I had a video on impermanence, and in that video on impermanence, I made a very interesting point, and it sounds like a reference to it, but it need not be. So what does it mean to live a finite and fragile life in an infinite and eternal universe? This statement like this takes a lot of interpretation. Suppose you know that the universe is infinite, eternal. You're enlightened. Everything is infinite. Everything is eternal. If you're enlightened like that, then everything that appears to be finite is what? If you're thinking at the level of infinity, then you think, what is all of this? The Hindi meaning of tuch is this kind of worthless, useless. The Sanskrit meaning is different, but the Hindi meaning is all so much garbage. Who cares about all this? Do you think that really describes the perspective of an enlightened person? Since Brahman is non-dual and infinite and limitless, all of this is garbage. This is garbage. This is a huge, huge misunderstanding. When you recognize that which is timeless, your perspective on anything bound in time changes, but in a very different way. Not in the sense of, ye tuche, this is useless, but rather, ye mahan hai, something wonderful. In that, by the way, if you haven't watched that video, to explore it, this question, I would encourage you to, if you're interested in this topic, find that video on impermanence. I forget the exact topic. The point I made is something that people don't generally, don't get about this. When you recognize the permanence of true reality and the impermanence of all of this being impermanent doesn't become worthless garbage, it becomes precious. And the example I give, and no, I didn't make this up, this is used by many authors and poets, and the example they give is that of a flower. Why do we love flowers so much? And why do we hate plastic flowers so much? Think about it. A silk flower, they can make them so that from a distance you can't make it out if it's real or if it's silk or plastic. You don't know until you try to smell it, until you feel its petals. Then you know it's plastic, it's silk, it's not real. And then what do? If it were a real flower, would you think about that? If you discover it to be an artificial flower, put it in the garbage bin. If it were a real flower, fragrant and blooming, would you put that flower in the garbage bin? Unlikely, right? Why? We appreciate its beauty because of its impermanence. The fact, otherwise, wouldn't you put the real flower in the garbage bin and keep the silk flower because tomorrow it'll look the same, the day after it'll look the same? Wouldn't you, logically speaking, if you were a really practical, kind of economically minded person, wouldn't you prefer the real flower because you can enjoy it next week, next month, next year? Hold on to it. No, it goes in the garbage bin. That which is permanent in a worldly sense, not permanent, that which is long-lived in a worldly sense is less valuable than that which is impermanent. That which is impermanent has an inherent beauty due to its impermanence. Something that needs to be treasured now. What about this then? This one is impermanent. 70, 80 years is not really that long. So this one is also impermanent. Therefore, needs to be treasured. Okay. I'm not sure if that is Juan's question or perspective. I hope that is a helpful response. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschad dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.